Well, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you joining us for this really important topic. I think this is something that needs to be discussed a lot more than it is. And so we're very happy that you're here with us, and you're going to really gain a lot of information from the panel that we have with you tonight and some personal stories and some great insights. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you very much to the Montgomery County Office of Drug and Alcohol for partnering with us to bring you this presentation. We are recording this program. We do ask that you go ahead and submit any questions. I know a few of you did submit some questions ahead of time, but please, as things come up during the presentation, you're welcome to drop those questions in the chat, or you can use the Q&A feature, and we will get to those at the end of the program, near the end of the program, to answer your questions. But this will be available on our website as a follow-up at conversation.zone/alcohol. My colleague Bob Lamb is on as well, and he's going to be putting some of these links in the chat. You're also going to see at the end of the program a survey pop up. Please take a moment to complete this, even if you have done it in the past. It really helps us to have feedback from you, to know what you would like to hear in the future, and how you felt about tonight's program, and so on. Shortly, I'll be introducing you to our panelists. We have three really terrific folks with you, and more on them in just a moment. I do want to do a little bit of advertising for Be a Part of the Conversation. We are so busy adding things to our calendar right now. One of the things we have coming up in a couple of weeks is an in-person program in Plymouth Meeting. Tom Connell's with us tonight, and this is where Ethos, where he is a co-founder of Ethos. In their building in Plymouth Meeting, there's a large meeting room. That's where we'll be on Tuesday, September 26th. I hope that you'll join us for this. We're going to be talking about opioid use, some of the other substances that are being found in the illicit market, in particular, things like trank, dope, which is xylazine, other things, but are very excited to have a special guest with us, Sarah Laurel, who is the founder and director of Savage Sisters. She's an amazing person in recovery herself, who has now taken her experience and started a whole lot of recovery houses. She is graciously bringing along some doses of Narcan for free distribution. She'll be doing a bit of training for that use, but we hope you'll join us for this really important program on September 26th. We have a couple of opportunities to come and see a prevention program that we do. We'll be at two different high schools. One middle school in Phoenixville, and then a high school in Hatfield Horsham in October. You can see the dates there. We will be presenting our mock teen bedroom, which shows some signs of substance use in teens and young people. And we'll also have our presentation, Parenting on Your Feet, which will help parents to have some tools to use if they are concerned about the substance use of one of their children. We are so excited to bring Kevin McCauley back in person. He's going to be here live, not on Zoom, and he's coming from, I think he lives in New Mexico or Arizona, one of those southwestern states, but he's been a presenter of ours in the past, and I think he is our highest view count on our YouTube channel because he is amazing. And so I hope you'll join us on Thursday, October 12th. We'll be at the Farmhouse at People's Light in Malvern, PA. So come on out and see us. If you've ever seen the films Pleasure Unwoven or Memory to Self, that's Kevin McCauley. He created those films many years ago, and he's a physician, he's a person in recovery, and he's just fabulous at explaining all of this. So hope you'll join us. These programs and others are going to be posted soon on our calendar. So there's the link to our calendar where you can find registration information for those programs that I just mentioned. We also have parent partnership meetings. I am the parent of somebody in recovery. I don't know where I would be without these meetings. We have now 19 meetings every week taking place both virtually and on Zoom, not hybrid, but both kinds. So you can see all the purple buttons here are meetings that take place in person. The green buttons are meetings on Zoom. You can click any of these buttons on this page of our website to get information about those meetings. They're peer-led, and they're just wonderful. They're much like Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, but they're specifically for parents, guardians, and grandparents. We also have a family recovery course available. None of our programs have a fee associated with them, and that includes the family recovery course. This is we're now going into our third year, kind of second full year of the family recovery course. It's a 3-part series. This is for parents, guardians, and grandparents who have a loved one struggling with a substance use disorder. This is not a prevention program. This is for family members who are really in the soup, so to speak, or still struggling with codependency, things like that, and just could use some support. This is peer-led. It's capped at 12 participants. It's a 3 parts, so 3 consecutive days, 3 consecutive weeks. So 3 Tuesdays in a row, 3 Thursdays in a row, what have you. You can find those dates on our website. So I'm going to just start with giving you a little bit of foundational information about alcohol, and then we're going to turn it over to our next presenter, Barbara, after I share a little bit of information. So alcohol is such a huge part of our culture. It has been part of our culture for as long as there have been photographs. But we know that alcohol consumption was really high during the Civil War even, and today we're actually creeping up on the numbers that they believe we were at during those very tumultuous times. But you can see that it's been so glorified, so much a part of our culture historically, that this certainly validates use for a lot of folks and really almost encourages it. You kind of be hard pressed to go to any sporting event without having it right there in your face. And I always think about that person in recovery from alcohol use disorder who walks into the grocery store now. Here in Pennsylvania, of course, we have it available in most grocery stores. And so the challenges that come with this are pretty considerable, I have to believe. And someone had asked in advance if they wanted to know what alcohol use is looking like today compared to a decade ago, when this is looking at a pretty good amount of time. And they're focusing in this one on wine and spirits, because that has escalated. And I'm asking Bob Lamb, who is our Director of Operations and Programs, to help explain this slide a little bit, because he's better at it than I am. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, so this one is basically showing that there has been an increased rate of alcohol consumption, specifically spirits and wine, over the last almost 20 years. Those rates have almost doubled per person for spirits and wine, meaning that in a year, one person would drink about a gallon of alcohol. That's how much is being sold. So it ends up being like almost a gallon and a half of hard spirits and wine being consumed, and we can see the rates have doubled since 1995 when this survey started.
Thank you, Bob. And I made a note here of some other information that came from this article that I found, and it said that as Bob pointed out, that's a gallon of ethanol alcohol. So the average American consumes 2.51 gallons of ethanol. That's the alcohol in wine, beer, and spirits in 2021. So that they compared that to 2.15 gallons in 1995. So about a half a gallon more than was consumed in 1995. But what they're pointing out is that if that sounds like not that much alcohol, 2.5 gallons in a year, consider that figure only covers the alcohol, not water and other ingredients that are in alcohol, in wine, in beer, in other spirits, so, and then you have your mixers, they're not counting that at all, but just the ethanol piece of that. So that's a considerable amount. And, when I talk about how ubiquitous this is and how acceptable culturally it is, there's this 80-20 rule in marketing that is applied to a lot of different kinds of products. It applies to the tobacco industry, fast food industry, processed foods. The manufacturers of these things, including alcohol, know that 80% of their product is consumed by 20% of their customers. So they are looking for somebody to want to drink a lot of alcohol. So they're really starting at a young age, trying to encourage young people to see this, even if they're over 21, but that youthfulness, the fun, some of those ads that I showed in the beginning, they're very healthy and young looking. And so it's promoting this as an important part of that experience of being a young person in America, right? Just go out there and have fun. And we also know that there's just so much of this supported, and you can go to any gift shop and find all these kinds of things. It's like, I remember somebody telling us that her aunt had her home decor was like alcohol. Like that was the theme of her house, the dish towels, the socks, the everything, right? So it's, you know, it can be fun to talk about, show things this way, but really it's just adding to that culture that we have of really making this such an important part of socialization, gatherings, sporting events, as I said, holidays. This is on, I believe this was on either Etsy or Amazon. Person turns 21, here's your starter kit for alcohol. So, you know, and this one is the one that really blows my mind. A wine pairing for Girl Scout cookies. You know, that's just wrong. Sorry. And if you look at age groups, this is coming from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Industry, and they're breaking it down. This is in 2020 by age group. So the dotted line here represents legal age of drinking in our country, which is 21. So under 21, you can see the current alcohol use versus heavy alcohol use. And then, of course, it picks up once it's legal. And so kind of pretty steady throughout our lives, picks up a little bit later in life, but just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what that looks like. But the heavy use in particular is kind of interesting. It does drop off after that initial year. Of course, it's going to be highest when that forbidden fruit is finally available for some folks. But, you know, we talk a lot in our programs about opioid use because we hear so much about it in the news, rightfully so. It has become quite deadly to be addicted to opioids. And so we know that in 2020, there were roughly 92,000 deaths due to opioid overdose. But I just want to compare this to the number of deaths due to alcohol use. These are alcohol-related diseases, and I'll talk about some of those in a moment. But we lost more people to alcohol use disorder and those related diseases in 2020 than we did to opioid use disorders. So it's just something that we don't think about because it's not that immediate mortality, but it does happen. Certainly, it just might take a longer time to play out with a lot of health consequences in the meantime as we progress in that use. And the definition of alcohol use disorder, also known as alcoholism, is this is a medical condition characterized by an impaired ability to stop. And this is kind of the key to all addictions is despite adverse consequences, the use continues. Certainly starting drinking at an early age definitely increases that risk. We talk about this all the time. If we start using any kind of substance at all, including alcohol, before we're have our frontal lobe fully myelinated and matured, then we have a much greater risk of developing a problem with it. Those who wait until they're over the age of 21, better yet, 25 or 26, have less of a chance of developing a problem with these substances. Certainly, genetics and family history plays an important role. So if there is alcohol use disorder or other substance use disorders in the family history, this is a real risk factor for our young people, for ourselves, and we have to really be conscientious about that. Mental health conditions can also play a role. Certainly, if we have pre-existing depression, anxiety, psychosis, any kinds of disorders like that, we really are at risk as well for self-medicating with something that gives us that escape, you know, gives our brain a way to feel a little bit better in the moment. And if we want to know, like, what does drinking look like in past year consumption, this is kind of interesting. This is looking at 18 and older, so not necessarily of legal age, but adults. So 18 and older, you can see that we have about a third of us who did not have a drink in the past year. This could be people in recovery. It could be people who are not, just choose not to drink. This large group of people are light drinkers. This is characterized by less than or equal to 3 drinks a week. That's probably not really that light if you're up to 3 drinks a week, but could be somewhere in there. It's a large group. So here we have moderate drinkers, about 15.5%. That's different categories for men and for women. And then about 5% of us are heavy drinkers, meaning for men, 14 or more drinks a week. For women, 7 or more drinks per week. And the Jelinek curve has been around for a long time. And the only time I really bring it up is when we're talking about alcohol, because I think progression is so important when we think about alcohol use. And I'm hoping that we'll hear from some of our panelists about this too. The fact that, again, because it is such a a culturally acceptable part of our lives. We might think that our drinking is appropriate, is average, is what my friends are doing. And then when life gets in the way and difficult things happen, whether it's relationship, career, financial, all sorts of things, emotional trauma, all sorts of things, then it's right there for us. We've already been using it, so we might pick up that use, and so it might escalate, and it really might become chronic, and we get sort of stuck in that trying to stop or cut back and into this cycle of sort of hitting bottom and not knowing how to find a way out. So then we're going to hear from, at least I know Tom Connell, I'm sure, will talk about ways that we can treat alcohol use disorder. We have the Diagnostic Statistics Manual that tells us what some of the characteristics are, some of the symptoms of alcohol use disorder. We have this available on that follow-up page. So if you're interested in seeing what some of those characteristics are, it might be helpful. But we know there's been a lot of talk about over the years, and I've certainly heard it myself, oh, if you have a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of wine, red wine in particular, we hear that it might help you to live longer and stave off some negative health consequences, but it turns out that it's really not the case. There's just no significant health benefit to even moderate consumption. So, there are a lot of things that unfortunately can do to harm our bodies. Alcohol can affect our brain function. There are a lot of studies looking at PET scans and things like that show the impact of alcohol use disorder on the brain, or even moderate or heavy consumption over time. The heart can certainly, there's a lot of data there's a study done looking at 19,000 people, I believe, that found a clear association through their increased systolic and the blood pressure. So the number of alcoholic beverages consumed daily was relating to this increase in blood pressure. So even those who were drinking one alcoholic beverage a day were having an increase in their blood pressure in this study. This look at 7 different studies, actually, that was done in, I believe, the US, Japan, and China. I'm going to share that on that follow-up page as well. It was a very interesting study. The liver, of course, we've all heard, I'm sure, of cirrhosis and some of the other problems that come along with consuming alcohol over time. The pancreas, pancreatitis, inflammation and swelling, this can be impacted. And also cancer, this can put us at risk for developing certain cancers. All alcohols, including beer, wine, hard liquors, all of those contain ethanol, as we talked about earlier. And ethanol is a known carcinogen. So, it can increase estrogen in the body and create problems that way. So that increases the risk for breast cancer. Ethanol breaks down in the body, that damages our DNA and causes liver and head and neck cancers and esophageal cancers. So lots of concern there as well. We want to give ourselves the best chance of avoiding cancer, certainly. The immune system can be compromised by a lot of alcohol use. And certainly we're still living. We were just talking before we started about COVID is still with us, folks. And, this is not good if we want to have a healthy immune system to be consuming a lot of alcohol that might deteriorate that in some way. Hormones can absolutely be affected by alcohol as well. So mood and libido and sexual activity for women, menstrual cycles, of course. And then other things like mental health challenges, even hearing loss. I mentioned high blood pressure already, STDs. Certainly when our inhibitions are down, we're not as, executive function isn't quite there as much. So we might be taking some risks that impact us as well. So with all of these things happening to our body, there is some very good news. We can turn things around if we stop or reduce our use. The benefits of quitting alcohol: better looking skin. You can see all the different things showing up here. Lower risk of all the things that I just described. So there are some treatments for alcohol use disorder. There are medications. There's naltrexone, which is available in pill form or as an injectable. And then we have some other medications that have been around for a long time. They are non-addictive. They may be used or combined with other kinds of treatments, such as talk therapy. Sometimes we'll have outpatient, inpatient, other ways to, depending on the severity of the alcohol use disorder. And of course, there are 12-step. I think we've all probably heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. That has been around since 1935 and still drawing millions of people every year into those rooms to get that mutual support from others with lived experience. This is a very affordable way to feel supported, not treatment per se, but it is certainly very supportive for a lot of folks. And that's a layer, right? It's just a piece of it. So please, if there's any real serious health concern, such as very important to note that if we have a pretty severe alcohol use, then we might be at risk when we start detoxing from it. The two substances that are most that put us at most risk for during withdrawal would be alcohol and benzodiazepines. So it's really important that we get medical care if we're really consuming a lot of alcohol and stop abruptly. Then we need to make sure that we are being treated for that withdrawal. So COVID has done so much to all of us. It's changed a lot of the ways that we live. But really, even alcohol use has changed. And I found this information from, I think this is the National Institute on Alcohol. I can't remember what all the A's are for, but it's all about alcohol use. And so they took a look at over time of just the last, no, not including this last couple of years, but 2019, 2020, and 2021, that you can see the alcohol-related deaths. Again, this is something that isn't the byproduct of heavy alcohol use, as can be loss of life. And you can see that alcohol-related deaths have really increased pretty dramatically. And there are a lot of studies showing that this is related to COVID and the isolation that came with it. In fact, even as early as 2020, they started to see some of these numbers. This was the Journal of the American Medical Association, showing that there was an overall 14% increase in consumption in 2020 among both men and women. But the numbers in this gray area are showing the impact on women in particular. Consumption increased even more disproportionately than men, and heavy drinking increased by 41%, and in alcohol-related problems increased by 39% among women in particular. There are a lot of ways to support alcohol reduction, reduction of alcohol use, and there's kind of a thing out there with being sober curious. We have, I can't remember which month it is that you're supposed to sober January, is it? I believe something like that. So there are also more and more facilities that, like restaurants, bars, things like that. They're serving mocktails that are really embracing the alcohol-free environment. So there is some good news that some folks are seeing the benefits of either reducing or stopping their alcohol use. And that's pretty much all that I have. So I am now going to turn it over to Barbara, and she is from Rutgers University. I'm going to ask you, Barbara, to tell us a little bit about yourself, since I don't have your bio in front of me, if you wouldn't mind. And don't forget to unmute. There you go.
Sure. So my name is Barbara Kasher, and I've been a substance use counselor at Rutgers for about 40 years. So really have been able to see a lot of changes and trends, and how college-age students have changed over the years, and work primarily with students who have co-occurring disorders and students who have had some trauma in their lives and maybe are using it as a way to cope with that trauma, and who come from families where there may be a substance use parent or a sibling. And so those are primarily my areas of interest in treatment. So I'm going to share the screen. Hopefully that works. Okay. And we will start slideshow. Start from the beginning. Okay. So one of the things I think, you know, for most of Americans, right, when they think about college-age students, they see drinking, and if you talk to college students themselves, they often think that drinking is just a rite of passage, and it's just the norm, an expectation for when students come to college. And it's really interesting because we'll have conversations with students about, like, what did you talk to your parents about before you came to college? Did you talk about drinking? Did you talk about drug use, what that might look like? And I would say it's probably a 60-40 split, where 60% have not had that conversation with their parents, or their parents have not had that conversation with them. And then maybe there's about a 40% where the conversation really centers around, safety issues, but not really about how to drink, right? It's really about, it's sort of, the conversation is don't drink, or if you're going to drink, be safe. And so I think students are coming to college with not a lot of experience and not a lot of knowledge or information, but with the expectation that they're going to drink. And the expectation is also that everybody else around them is going to drink. And so one of the things that we often find out is that everybody thinks everyone else is drinking a lot more. And everybody else thinks that everybody else is using drugs a lot more and having sex a lot more than what the reality shows. And so I think that kind of pressure really starts to get transcended into behavior, because people want to fit in, right, when they go to college. And that's the way they think they're going to fit in. And so drinking very much becomes part of the culture and an expected norm. So I thought I would throw out just some facts and figures and talk a little bit about what some of this looks like on a college campus. So roughly about 80% of college students, 4 out of every 5, consume alcohol to some degree. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that sort of that 80-20 rule applies here also, because what we find is that about 80% of students actually wind up drinking maybe 2 to 3 drinks when they do drink. And it's that 15 to 20% that really drink much more heavily and cause many more problems on campus, both for themselves and for the campus. So, I think that I think the idea in our heads, and if you think of media and the kind of movies, that we see about what college looks like, the idea is that everybody's out every weekend and getting really, really drunk. And that's not necessarily the truth. They are drinking, but many of the people are drinking in a way that does not become problematic. But for those that do drink, in that sort of 15 to 20%, if we look at the next stat, is that while 104,000 of 18-year-old first-year college students met criteria for alcohol use disorder in 2019, by the time it's 2021, that number has doubled. So we really start to see an increase in the number of students who have pretty substantial alcohol use disorder issues on campus. It was really interesting when we looked at COVID. So I can speak for my university, Rutgers. We closed down in 2020. Everybody went home in March 2020. And then the following year, everything was still remote. So that students didn't come back on campus until fall of, some of them came back spring of 2022, but a lot of them didn't come back until the following fall. For a lot of our students, because they were living at home, their drinking actually did decrease because they were living at home with their parents, and it wasn't as accessible as obviously it is on a college campus, where you can go to a fraternity party on a Friday night. You can go to your older friends' apartments, right? The bars, depending upon the bar, or some of them are pretty strict, some of them are pretty lenient. So there obviously is underage drinking at the bars, but it wasn't like that when students went home for COVID. Just to let you know, what we did see, though, was more of an uptick in cannabis use during COVID, because people could vape in their parents' homes and their parents didn't necessarily know what they were doing. So we did see a little bit of a decrease, but for those students who had an alcohol use disorder, as was said before, the isolation and the lack of connection, for that small percentage, there was an uptick in problematic drinking. The other thing we see on a college campus is that in terms of populations, Greek life and athletes do drink larger amounts of alcohol, sort of binge drinking, but in shorter periods of time. So when you look at like weekly consumption, those populations don't drink as much in terms of weekly consumption, but if you look at overall consumption, it's higher. So that when athletes are in training, they tend to not drink. But when they're off season, their drinking is higher than the students who are not athletes. And the same goes for Greek life. When students are rushing, although again, and I can only speak for Rutgers, the idea seems to be that, right, everybody in Greek life is drinking really heavily. And although they are drinking more than non-Greek life students, it's in a more concentrated period of time because the oversight for the university tends to be a little bit harder during those periods of rushing. And a lot of the events are non-alcoholic events. But when those restrictions are taken off of them, then you see the uptick in drinking. One of the other things that we saw, which I think was talked about in another slide, is that we have started to see a little bit of a switch in college age populations in terms of gender. Women are starting to outnumber men slightly in terms of percentage of who is drinking alcohol on a monthly basis. I mean, it's 53 to 51%, but this is the first time that we're really starting to see women, a higher percentage of women reported drinking than men. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how that continues to fall out in the future, and if we'll continue to see a more of a discrepancy, or whether that'll flip back. So it's hard to tell what that may look like. But I guess a couple things that I wanted to talk about was the idea that there is this perception, right, that everyone at college is drinking. And we really try to dispel those myths with our students. And so there's a lot of, I think this is across the nation, that there really has been a sort of a push to try to flip those messages that a lot of students have gotten as they come into college, that the expectation is that they'll be drinking and that they'll be drinking heavily. And so really trying to find a space across campus for other activities and for sober activities for students. I think that it's a quiet voice, but I think it's a voice that we're trying to put in different areas. Again, I think that there's been a little bit of a shift. It goes back to not only COVID, but just in general so I'm from New Jersey and I can speak for New Jersey, where cannabis is legal. That has made a real difference. I would say about maybe 10, 15 years ago, about 31% of our students reported using cannabis in a year, and now it's up to almost 46%. And so we're really starting to see more and more students using cannabis, and I think their perception is that it's somehow safer than alcohol, right? It doesn't get them into trouble the same way that drinking does. And so I don't think it's going to take over as the drug of choice on campus, but I think it's going to be neck and neck, which isn't really a good thing because it just means that we have two drugs on campus that students are engaging in and can cause a lot of problems. So consequences of alcohol use. In terms of college age, we know that 18 to 23, I have 24 here, these are for the consequences, but that's probably the heaviest drinking that somebody's going to do throughout their life. And so we sort of acknowledge that that is going to be a reality for most people. And I think that the graphs in the past presentation showed that there is some drop off after the age of 21. So this is really the heaviest period of drinking that we see for people. And we see drinking and driving as a really a big issue. Actually, I was just talking to a colleague today, and between last week and this week, he's had 2 students in his office who have gotten DUIs on campus, right? And so I think oftentimes students will think, oh, I'm just moving my car from, where I'm parked and going to get a ticket to a different parking space. It's only a block away, and they're under the influence, and they somehow think that that's, nothing's going to happen. They're going to be safe, right? So I think we're still in a adolescent mindset in many ways for college students, and they think nothing is ever going to happen to them, right? And so the consequence of a DUI is pretty serious, and maybe one of those first indicators that somebody may be experiencing problems with alcohol. The 696,000 assaults on campus. Again, I was just talking to a colleague this morning, and she mentioned the triple threat. And I was like, oh, what are you talking about? And she said, oh, the triple threat of the first 3 weeks of the semester, where you see the largest percentage of sexual assaults happening on campus. And it's often because you have first-year students who may not have a lot of experience with alcohol, who are away from home for the first time, and their drinking may wind up in a sexual assault. And so I had not heard that sort of call triple threat before. But we know that that's a really big connection, right? The connection between sexual assault on campus and drinking. And again, a lot of campuses have tried to be really proactive in educating the students about alcohol and the legal ramifications. But I think, for a lot of people, the thinking is that would never happen to me, right? And so this is just one other consequence that we find that can also lead to trauma, right? And then continue drinking for some people to deal with the trauma. We also know that there's a lot of injuries that go on campus. Oftentimes, people are falling down, downstairs. People are coming home the next morning with bruises and aren't sure how they get their bruises. But we also know that there's hospital overdoses, right? So that we had our first home football game 2 weeks ago, and then we had another home football game this past Saturday. And our Office of Student Conduct, who handles those incidents where a student has gotten into some kind of trouble having to do with alcohol or substances, was talking to our department and said the first weekend there had been 10 hospital transports for students who had been had overdosed on alcohol, and sort of giving us a heads up because there was going to be another home game this past Saturday. And so a lot of schools do have programs. We have a program in place for those students who do get either sent to the hospital or have other infractions due to alcohol, where we present educational programs, and for more serious offenses, do a 2 to 3 session intervention to just try to help students understand their drinking a little bit more and get some more factual information about alcohol use. But we also know that over 1,500 students die from alcohol-related injuries, including motor vehicle crashes. And so the consequences for students are pretty serious. And again, I think that, as a society, we sort of have this fun idea of what drinking looks like, especially for young people. And then you have that percentage of students who really can experience pretty serious consequences due to their drinking. But there is hope, and that's always a good thing. And so one of the trends that we've started to see over the past couple of decades is recovery on campus. And what it really offers students in recovery is a supportive environment within an institution of higher learning. It reinforces and strengthens the decision that students make for a lifestyle of recovery from substance use. And for it also values peer related services for students. What we are finding is that more and more students are coming to campus, even as first year students, with years and years of treatment, which I can tell you is really different than when I first started. It was rare to have somebody get sober in high school. And now it's not as uncommon, right? Or it was rare for somebody to have their first incident of treatment in 10th and 11th grade, right? And now it isn't as uncommon. So that by the time students are coming to college, they can have a pretty extensive treatment history. And a lot of times the treatment is really for not only substance use, but also co-occurring mental health disorders. And so really want to offer those students a safe place on campus where they feel like they can enjoy a college experience, have fun, have the experience that some of their friends and peers who are not in recovery are having, but in an environment where the risk of substance use in their living environment is completely gone, right? And so it has really offered a lot of students a great deal of support, and I think has really given them an opportunity to really thrive on campus. One of the statistics we always share is that for students in recovery, their GPA actually winds up being higher than for students who are not in recovery. And so I think it really shows the strength of that kind of community and the support that they can get there, that really allows them to access resources on campus and support, and really allows them to thrive and pursue their academic goals in a way that they may not be able to if that environment and that community was not there. Oh, here we go. So what do collegiate recovery programs look like? I think, one of the things to know is that they really are all over, and they're really not only in the United States, they're in Canada now, in the UK, a lot more countries. I just read somewhere that there's a school in France who is looking to partner with a school in Italy and sort of form this EU consortium of recovery schools. And so I think the trend is on the move. Again, I think that when it first started in the 80s and 90s, it was the rare school that had that kind of program. But I think schools are smart, right? They know that this is an audience that is looking for support, and the success rate for these students is really high. And so I think schools are, offering their support and their service for these students. But they look really different across the country. And so for some schools, it's just a club. It's like any other club on campus that students can go to and connect once a week or once every other week with other students in recovery. It's typically maybe there's a faculty advisor who may or may not be in recovery. But it's really it's financially supported by the school, and that really is the extent of the support that it has. A club like any other. There may be courses. Some colleges offer a course for credit for their students in recovery, and it's kind of a skills-based course, right, to talk about how to thrive at a college campus in recovery. And they may have outside speakers come in and talk about different departments, maybe somebody from learning centers, somebody from the counseling centers, somebody from recreation, and offer that information for those students. And a lot of times it's like a 3-credit course. Sometimes there's a clubhouse. So there's actually a physical, either a room or a building on campus where students in recovery can hang out. And that's really good for students who maybe don't live on campus and maybe commute, because that can be really isolating. And so being able to meet other students in recovery and have a place to go to and know that they're walking into an environment where the other people in this room get them, understand them. There's no risk that people are going to be using. And a place where they can study and have social events that they can be connected to. There's also many schools that have 12-step meetings or other self-help groups on campus, not affiliated with the school, but maybe housed in the school. And so I know at Rutgers, we have a number of 12-step meetings housed in university buildings. We also have a smart recovery meeting in another building. And so I think it's a great way for students who have come from another state or another town, who are moving into a new place at college, to get immediate connection. I just had a student who will be graduating in December, and he's moving to San Francisco. And he said to me, the great thing is, even though I don't know anybody in San Francisco, I can walk into a meeting the night that I move in and meet a room full of people that I know are going to get me and support me. And that's such a powerful thing for a young person, or for anybody, right, who's moving into a new environment. And so I think 12-step meetings are also a really good way for students to network and to get sponsors, right? So if you're moving into a new environment and into a town where you don't know anybody, and you're moving into a collegiate recovery program, going to a meeting is a great place to meet a sponsor, right? And because your sponsor may no longer be that close, right? And so this is a place to meet somebody new. There's also collegiate recovery programs that partner with treatment centers in those local communities. And I know that there are a few, I believe there's a couple in the Philadelphia area, but there's a couple in Atlanta, where there may be a big treatment program not far from campus. And so students are allowed to use those programs and those groups and get some services there. But even if there's a housing component to that treatment program, sometimes students are allowed to live in that housing component and then go to campus. And so it's, again, a safe environment for students to move into and still experience the college environment. And then there's recovery housing, right? So that a number of schools have housing on campus where students in recovery can live, and it's a regular residence hall. And the way that schools do that can be really, really different. Some schools, you have to interview for a placement in the recovery house. In some schools, you don't. In some schools, it may be part of a large residence hall, but like the floors above and below may not be recovery housing. And in some schools, it's a completely freestanding entire residence hall that the students in recovery live in. And again, I'll speak for Rutgers. We have a recovery residence hall. So we have the entire residence hall. And we were the first university in the United States to have recovery housing. And it's a great environment for our students. They do a lot of really fun things. I mean, if you walked into the recovery house, you would think you were walking into any other residence hall on campus. Students are up at 2:00 in the morning. They're eating junk food, they're laughing, they're playing video games. They're also studying and doing work. But it's a safe place for them. And it's a place where they know that they can walk into at any time. And, they may not be best friends with everybody in the house, but there is a sense of connection. And they know that if they're having a hard day, they could go talk to anybody in the house, and they will understand them and support them. We also have two RAs who live in our recovery house, as many other recovery programs do, and they're from the community. And so they interview for the position like any other RAs in a college setting, and are people who, plan events and, are there for roommate problems, which, like any other residence hall, they occur too. And if there is a return to use, would probably be the first person who finds out that there is a return to use, and then that sort of moves up the chain. We were lucky enough, and a lot of schools have this, to have to be able to hire a recovery support person who works really closely with the students in the recovery house. And a lot of other schools have that, like the peer support. The next point I wanted to make was, not only is it different in terms of what recovery support looks like on campus, but how it's staffed also looks really different. So it could be completely peer support, right? So that it's just students meeting with students and connecting and supporting one another, to, professionally staffed. And so, and every school does this differently. Some schools, require that their students be connected to a clinician, either for check-ins or for counseling. I can again speak for us. We are professionally staffed by with LCADCs and LACs or LCSWs, and then our college peer support recovery person. We ask our students to come in and engage in counseling. But I'm reminded of one of the first facts that I talked about, which is a lot of students are coming to counseling with years of treatment, right? And so I think that some students need counseling, some students do not want anything to do with counseling, and some students are still looking to explore some areas in recovery. And so we really work with where the students are at and what their needs are at. We also run an early recovery group for the students who are new to our house or new to recovery. Again, I think college is a big transition. College when you're sober is a really big transition. A lot of students transfer from other schools, and this may be the first time they're at college and being sober. And so we really want to offer them a space to be able to talk about, what is it like to get out of class at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night when you're walking down College Avenue and all the other kids are going to the bars, right? What is that like? Because you're not doing that, right? And so what can we offer you? What kind of support can you get from your peers to be able to talk about what that's like, right? Again, there's lots of different variations of collegiate recovery programs. I've just shared with you in a little bit more detail of what we do, but there's lots of variations of every part of that. A really good website to look at, I put on the slide, gives a lot of information, lists all of the programs in the country, so that if you're working with young people of college age, you can sit down and you can look at what the different programs are, what the schools have to offer, and really kind of make decisions about what would be a good match for your students. The last thing I wanted to talk about was something really interesting, and that's this idea of I really should have put redefining recovery, because I think we're in this space where some of this is starting to shift a little bit. And so, at least in the college recovery community, people are starting to talk about recovery in a more fluid way. I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I thought it would be interesting to just sort of throw it out here tonight. So that if somebody's drug of choice was cannabis and they are abstaining from cannabis, are they considered in recovery, right? It's kind of something that I think, and even us as a program, we're starting to grapple with and sort of think about in a way that we would have never even thought about talking about 10 years ago. And again, I think we're seeing variations of that across a lot of different programs across the nation. It'll be interesting to see where that lands. For now, we are really looking at recovery as somebody who is not using any substances, and is committed to that. But I think it's an interesting concept that may be around for a while. So I kind of wanted to end on something a little more provocative and just something to think about. But thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Barbara. That was really interesting. And Bob was one step ahead of you. He already had the collegiaterecovery.org in the chat. So we've already got that shared out there with everybody. So thank you for pointing that out. That was wonderful. All right, Tom Connell.
Right as I'm taking a gulp of my water. There we
Okay,
go.
Tom Connell is the co-founder and of Ethos Treatment. He is a clinician, outpatient therapist. Did you swallow your water? Can you talk now?
I did. I'm good. You just let me know when to go.
You're
But
good. Go
thanks,
ahead.
Kim. Thanks, Barbara, for your talk, and thanks, Kim, for having me. I'm a big believer in be a part of the conversation. Was around when Kim kind of got things started, and it's been a powerful vehicle in our area just to kind of get people talking about what's really important. That's why we're here tonight, to really just kind of talk. I'll talk a little bit more from a treatment perspective, but I'll start off with being a parent. Me and my wife were walking on the boardwalk this summer down in Wildwood, and we saw, oh my God, it must have been in the dunes off to the side, must have been like 50 to 100 kids, and they all had backpacks. So I was like, when we were talking, like, what's the backpacks all about? What's the back? And so the police come down and they're trying to herd everybody away and say, you can't loiter here. And they did a great job. But a little further down, we saw another group, about like 20, 30 people. And a couple of them were opening their backpacks, pulling out big bottles of vodka, vodka seltzers in cans. And I said, oh, that's what the backpacks were. Hopefully not everybody had booze in their backpack, but there were a lot of kids that were, using the backpack to kind of cover up what they had inside. And as Kim pointed out, more and more today, what we're seeing is there's more ways to access alcohol. When I started drinking I think at 13, it was like went to my dad's liquor cabinet. But now you have not just social gatherings and sporting events, but now they're readily available in supermarkets, gas stations, and the big thing too is online ordering. I don't know, it's been around for a while, but kids are going through Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and actually getting alcohol. I had a young kid who was about 17, and he was his grandmother had something set up with Uber Eats to deliver wine, and so he would just sneak access his credit card information. So I guess all her ID info was in there, and would intercept the delivery, a box of wine, before grandma got home or in from her walk. So kids will always kind of find ways to access it. Part of it's just curiosity, getting into alcohol. I tried to gather some of the disturbing trends since the pandemic, and Barbara touched on one of them. We definitely seen an increase in young women using alcohol, and there's a school of thought that because women are a little bit more emotional than most typical guys, they're more susceptible to internalizing stress, anxiety, depression, other mental health issues, and this makes them more likely to drink to just kind of cope with the emotions. In fact, when girls have high levels of anxiety, they're more likely than young boys to use alcohol, and do it at an earlier age. So helping young women handle difficult emotions in adolescence and in the teen years, helping them find healthy ways to deal with those issues rather than use alcohol or avoid it altogether, it becomes paramount. Alcohol, like Kim pointed out, it still continues to be the most widely used and abused substance among our American youth. A higher proportion every year uses alcohol more than tobacco, more than marijuana, more than other drugs. It consistently, for decades, leads the category in some of the more harmful consequences. Underage drinking, 15%, this is 2019, 15% began using alcohol before they were 13 years old. Nearly 2.3 million 12 to 17-year-olds used alcohol for the first time in 2019, which averages to about 6,200 adolescents who began to use alcohol on a daily basis. So underage drinking is alive and well, and in all of our neighborhoods. Also, 2019, over 7 million 12 to 20-year-olds reported that month that they used alcohol, and over 4 million reported the past month binge drinking. Binge drinking is when you drink 4 or 5 drinks in a very short period of time. That's the basic definition. And over nearly 1 million youth reported the past month heavy alcohol use. On their most recent drinking occasion, 72% of youth reported they obtained alcohol for free. And most got their alcohol from a non-relative who was older than 21. That was about 22% surveyed that year. Or a person under the age of 21, 12% of the time. And half of them, or 50% of the youth, drank alcohol in someone else's home. Okay. Those are real stats that come from SAMHSA, other great websites like that where people collect data. I'm not a real data guy. I'm more of an experiential guy, but I know people kind of like to hear that. So the serious consequences, they kind of remain the same every year, but just kind of underage drinking contributes to wide range of costly health and social problems, including suicide, death from motor vehicle accidents, interpersonal violence, such as homicides, assaults, rapes. We still see 68% of people that are in prison related to alcohol and drug use. Unintentional injuries such as burns, falls, and drownings, brain impairment, leads to alcohol dependence, risky sexual activity, academic problems and issues, and alcohol poisoning. So that's the age groups from like 12 to 26. So what are the biggest factors that influence youth alcohol consumption? Number one, teens' ability to regulate and manage their feelings and emotions. So as a parent, if your kid is struggling with feelings like most youth and teenagers do, you have to look out, are they medicating some of that with alcohol? Also, another thing to watch out, who are their friends, their social connections? Are they isolating? What's their friend group like? Are their friends into alcohol, those type of things? And the third biggest one is family-related predictors, such as parental drinking behavior. So what's it like around your home with alcohol? What are your rules about alcohol use? Are you a drinker? Do you keep it out in the open? Those things make a difference. And a kid's how attached a kid is to their family of origin. Are there healthy avenues for communication to be heard? Those type of things. And of course, how much a parent monitors the things that we talked about earlier can have a great impact on drinking behaviors in adolescence. I told my 2 youngest girls, some people think I was a little too harsh with this one, but they know I've been an addiction counselor for 37 years. But when they were in high school, I said, look, kids, if you ever get arrested for drunk driving or underage drinking, I want to let you know now that I love you both very much, but I will wait 24 hours while you sit in that jail cell and think about what just happened, and then I'll come get you. I walked away from that. Their eyes were big as quarters, and my wife said, "Do you think that'll work?" I said, "I don't know." And I don't even know if I can hold that boundary when they start crying, but that was my intent. We as parents, we want our kids to learn, and sometimes, unfortunately, it does take events like that happening. I often thought, like with cigarettes, when there were all those lawsuits about tobacco and they started to put the warning labels on cigarettes, I was trying to find some research to see, did that really actually make an impact? And of course, I'm a thinker, I'm an overthinker, would it make a difference with alcohol? But I imagine we'd have to list about 100 different side effects, and some of them Kim covered earlier on that warning label. Some of them might be may cause blackouts or loss of memory, could lead to increased cravings or obsessions, may worsen anxiety, feelings of isolation and depression, may cause withdrawal symptoms like seizures, shakes, hallucinations, and liver, kidney, and heart disease if used over time, can lead to poor social decisions, especially around sexuality, partner choices, alienation of friends and family, and drunk driving, could lead to an increased domestic violence, arguments, increased levels of agitation, and may result in suicidal thoughts or preoccupation, just to name a few. Unfortunately, I don't think that would make much of a difference. I think people would ignore the labels. And so why is that? Well, Americans love alcohol. It's so woven into our daily existence. And there's a lot of reasons why people drink, but the biggest reason is, and most people would agree with this, the effects it has on our brain. So the primary reason that most people have to drink is to relax. It's a sedative to kind of unwind. But the biggest reason is to kind of get that buzz. So alcohol, if you break it down as a pharmacological, drug, it changes with the amounts that we drink. So in small quantities, it's like a stimulant. But really what I think is going on is people's inhibitions are lowered. Their decision making is affected because they kind of feel pretty good. But in larger amounts, alcohol is always a sedative, and it's a powerful sedative. Okay. It's really hard to overdose from drinking too much. I mean, sometimes kids will get alcohol poisoning, but you really can't drink enough. You end up falling asleep or passing out before you ever, for most of us, ever hit that toxic level, which will kill us. So you don't tend to see a lot of alcohol overdoses unless there are other drugs included in that. You do see alcohol poisoning. Kids today, a lot of them are binge drinkers. So they're sneaking around, they're trying it. So they tend to, drink a lot in a short period of time. And that's really what kind of gets them into trouble. Their brains aren't used to that. The other thing, too, that, you hear a lot of good research about dopamine. Dopamine, when a person drinks, when any of us drink, dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that's in the old part of our brain, that has to do with pain and pleasure, levels surge. Even if you're not a problem drinker, when you have a couple of drinks, dopamine is affected. And that's saying, that's in that part of the brain is saying, this is good. This feels really good, really good. The problem is when the drug wears off and dopamine levels drop, then people tend to feel terrible. That's what the hangover is all about, And if you have anxiety and depression and other things, you're just going to kind of feel worse as the drug wears off. And that's what gets people into trouble with addiction. Okay, it's that repetitive cycle of just kind of bombarding our brain with alcohol. And our brain actually changes. It kind of gets used to it and it likes it. But then when the dopamine wears off, and this is why some people get in that cycle of drinking again and again, they feel horrible. It depends on what's going on in their life, but they just feel horrible because the dopamine levels have dropped. So they'll use again in order to feel better, and that's where addiction really kind of takes root. Luckily today we have tons of treatment out there, more so than ever. We have tons of mental health counselors and drug and alcohol counselors. There's all levels of care. Ethos does intensive outpatient and outpatient treatment, but other facilities do residential treatment, detoxification, a structured living where you kind of go to partial or IOP, and you can also live at one of their recovery houses. So there's tons of options out there. So when people come into my office, and specific with alcohol, not to overgeneralize, but I really think there's three types of alcohol problems that are out there. One is genetic alcoholism. Okay. And these are the folks that come in and we'll be doing an assessment with them. And they have a really strong history loaded with alcoholics or people that really kind of abused alcohol. Okay. Or have struggled with alcohol problems. And what's interesting about this group is they tend to land in treatment. Their first episode is usually around 15, 16, 17 years old. But when you interview them and you ask, what was it like your first drink? A lot of times they'll report, it was fantastic. Oh my God, Tom, it was like the missing link. It just made me feel so great. Like I just fell in love with the drug immediately. So that's one type of alcoholism. The second type, the most prevalent type, is what I was talking about earlier. I call it the hijacked brain form of alcohol substance use disorder. And these are the folks that drink over time, right? and maybe they drink successfully for a period of time, and then they almost cross an invisible line where because of that dopamine phenomenon, there's something that exists that didn't exist before, and it's simply by just using alcohol over and over and over again. And it's really hard to kind of pinpoint with these folks, where they cross the line. You can kind of narrow it down to maybe a 6-month period or something like that. But they'll all of a sudden report, hey, I wasn't able to stop after 2 drinks. I just kind of kept going. And I started to develop cravings, and if I didn't have physical cravings, I started to develop rumination and thoughts about alcohol, looking forward to it when I came home from work, that type of thing. I think it's really hard. It's really hard for teens. It's really hard to diagnose or really get a clear clinical picture of what's going on. So the best route for use, it tends to be getting them enrolled with a counselor, somebody who kind of knows about substance abuse, but can also kind of help them work through some of the emotional stuff or hormonal stuff or where there's going on with their social group, and then kind of weave in some of the prevention about alcohol, drugs, and misuse and abuse of that. So, but the hijack brain, it's almost like in those cases, people come in, say, I drank okay for a period of time, and then I kind of cross the line, and now it's a whole different animal, and I don't know how I got here. Please help me. And then the third type, and a lot of our youth fall into this, is what Barbara was kind of talking about, what she sees at college campuses. And that's, there's a lot of people out there that self-medicate with alcohol. And I don't know if they're alcoholic yet or even dependent yet, but they tend to really use alcohol when they're feeling anxious or uptight, or if they're having bouts with depression, or if they have a traumatic life event, loss of a loved one, or some other kind of trauma. And they get into a bad pattern of self-medication is the best thing I could call it. And we saw this a lot in the pandemic, where people who were really kind of moderate drinkers, when they were kind of locked in alone, they started to feel stress or feel that the boundaries of work were lifted, and they started hitting alcohol more frequently, and they found themselves kind of coming to our centers and saying, hey, I don't know what's going on here. Do I have a problem here? Help me kind of figure it out. And what we use for assessment is the criteria is very clear. It's in the DSM-5, which is our manual for diagnosing every kind of mental health disorder. But there are 11 criteria that you have to meet. You only have to meet 2 out of 11 to be classified as alcohol substance use disorder. And it has to happen over a 12-month period of a person's life and drinking. And I won't go over all 11 criteria, but the biggest ones are changes in tolerance, which is how much of the alcohol does it take to get that same effect that people are looking for? Has that changed over 12 months? And loss of control. And that's the biggest thing with loss of control. Isn't like when I'm under the influence, I lose control. It's when I start to drink, am I able to consistently stop? And people that have crossed the line always say, no, I can't. I don't know what happened, but I can't always stop after 1 or 2. My wife can always stop. She's a social drinker. If we go out to a restaurant, she can have a glass of wine and she can always shut it off. She can have 2. She can always shut it off. Me, I wasn't like that. It was almost as if and I believe I was a combination. I was a genetic alcoholic. Every firstborn male in my family had problems with alcohol. From the first time I drank, I could never shut it off. It's almost like I was born without an off switch when it came to alcohol. So we assess somebody, we get them into a level of care. What are the biggest challenges? And I'll kind of close on this. The biggest challenges are relapse. If you can convince a person to give it up for a period of time, then you want to see what happens. And a lot of times for alcohol, group therapy works really well, being in there with other people who have had problems with alcohol. And even if they're in different stages of acceptance, that kind of dialogue that occurs between them is powerful. And even with the youth, we see it a lot when kids a lot of times won't talk to their parents. When they're in there with other kids, after they kind of spend some time goofing around and playing around, they do tend to get serious and really talk about what some of the some of the emotional components that are going on in their life that, as to why they smoke pot or why they drink alcohol. But the biggest challenge is when somebody has cravings and that mental preoccupation, is a lot of time is spent, teaching them coping skills. What do you do when you get a craving? What do you do when you're in a situation and you feel like drinking? And what's your support network out there? And the other biggest thing is a phenomenon called post-acute withdrawal. And so what this is, there's symptoms like drunk dreams, alcohol cravings, anxiety and moodiness. People seek out using other substances than alcohol to kind of treat those symptoms. Agitation can occur, just to name a few. And these symptoms can actually last up to 18 months after a person has had their last use. And they can kind of hit you out of the blue, where they had a stressful day or not a stressful day at work. You might be experiencing one of these symptoms. And a lot of times people come into our groups and they're kind of talking about those things. They're a normal part. What we try to educate people is they're a normal part of recovery. Like, you don't have to be terrified. It's great you're talking about it. And it's great you want help with that. We could teach you some CBT techniques to lessen some of that. But it's actually your brain just healing from all the damage that was done with the dopamine receptor sites. So a lot of times parents will come to me and say, I think he's using, I want you to drug test him, and I'll test them and there's nothing in there. And they were just having a bad day and they were really, on an emotional roller coaster, so to speak. Euphoric recall is another thing. And Barb probably sees this a lot on college campus. So a kid could be sober, let's say 6 months, really doing well, and they'll test the waters and go to a party where there's a lot of drinking going on. All of a sudden they have a craving that wasn't there before, because the memory, when we're in early recovery and we're remembering alcohol, a lot of times we tend to remember the pleasant stuff about it, not all the consequences. And so that's where having a support network and having people that kid can reach out to in those times of need becomes really, really important. And really the difference between whether somebody stays in recovery and whether they fall back into an episode of relapse. So the best advice I could give in summary, one of our jobs as parents or family members is to, educate our children. And sometimes that doesn't mean being a friend. Sometimes being a parent's tough. That's a tough job, and standing firm is tough. But when it comes to alcohol, it's okay to stand firm. To live in our house, these are the rules you got to follow. If ever you think your loved one or somebody is struggling, get them help. And if you think or you suspect it's more than just typical adolescence or stress, have them get evaluated by somebody who has experience with drug and alcohol. Kim's program has proven that early intervention makes a difference. So whether your kid hates you or not isn't that important. I want you to go for 8 visits and just talk to this counselor and see if it makes a difference. That's key. So I hope everybody takes that home tonight. Thanks again for letting me share. I know everybody's anxious to hear Claire. That's the best part of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. That was awesome, as always. Claire, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claire, and I am an alcoholic. I have been clean and sober since August 24th, 2007. I'll just tell you a very abbreviated what it was like, what happened, and what it's like for me now. I know that one of the questions came in was what was the turning point in your life when you realized your alcohol intake was starting to turn over in your life? And I'll definitely address that. I love what's been said so far. I checked a lot of those boxes. I come from a family of alcoholics. I didn't know that when I was a kid. Nobody talked about anything when I was a kid, so I was very confused. So as soon as I got my hands on alcohol and tasted that stuff, I was, in heaven. So I think I had my first sip around 8, probably my first drunk around 12 or 13, had my first blackout around 14. Didn't call it that, never called them blackouts until I got sober. But looking back, it's like, that was a blackout. And it was hard for me to get my hands on it middle school and high school. But when I did, it was like, I just wanted to feel good. Like I wanted to have fun and feel good. And I felt comfortable in my skin. And I started having some consequences in high school. Like I would latch on to boyfriends, and then the boyfriend wouldn't like how I got when I drank too much. And so I would put it down for the boyfriend, but then I would get a resentment and be like, why aren't I having fun? And then I would dump him and start drinking again, so there was this cycle of like, it's not my problem, it's your problem. Went off to college and drank like crazy in college and had the best time, I have to say. But I was young enough and resilient enough to bounce back and still get to class. I failed to acknowledge the progressive nature of my drinking. I thought the way I was drinking at 20 was just like how I was going to drink forever, that I could still go to class, I could still get my work done, people still liked me, I had a boyfriend, like nothing was really wrong in my life. But I was comparing myself to the way my mom used to drink. And I was like, well, an alcoholic is someone that lies a lot, sneaks around, passes out, craves alcohol, drinks alone. I'm none of those things, right? So after college, I really didn't want the party to end. I was one of those that like didn't drop off drinking. I just like kept it going. Went to grad school, had a kegerator in my room at grad school so that I could party and still work. And then off into the real world. And this is when it started, my pattern started to take off. So every 2 years I had a new boyfriend, a new job, a new city. And I would make a big mess and then cut and run. And I thought I was living the life. I did this over and over and over. And looking back now, it's so clear the progression. I would try to like rein it in when I would things would get a little too heated, or a boyfriend when something would happen. Put it down for a week. See, I'm not an alcoholic. I didn't have a drink for like a week. I'm fine. Right. So it just chased me. And there were a few times where like I ordered the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous off of eBay. This was like in 2000, and try to read it myself and get this information. I was like, that's not for me. That's great for other people. But my problem is my mom, who's the alcoholic. So I'll go to an Al-Anon meeting. But this was all good because I was gathering information. And then by the end of my drinking, I was 34. I was living with someone that drank as much, if not more than I did. And I came to the realization I have been drinking every day for 3 years. It was mostly wine, but it was bottles and bottles of wine. And I would think, I really need to talk to my doctor about it. And then I would go talk to my doctor and I'd be like, I'm still really anxious and I can't sleep and my back hurts. So she would give me pills for all of these things, and I'd wash them down with bottles of wine. And, I avoided major consequences. I don't know how. I drove drunk all the time. I lived in cities that had public transportation though, so that helped me. I like to fly under the radar. But I, still had a car, still had a job, never had a DUI. I'm like, I'm fine, right? But the personal consequences and my health, once I put alcohol in my body, I could not predict how the night would end. And that's a scary way to live. So I could wake up in bed with some person I don't know, or I could try to walk home from a club at 2 a.m. where I'd lost my shoes, like really dangerous, scary behavior that starts a shame cycle. And I would drink at that shame cycle. I would wake up the next morning and be like, oh, what did I do? Like the crippling hangover, the crushing demoralization, and trying to piece together what happened the night before and thinking everybody drank this way and that this is great, but then not being able to handle it. And I'd start drinking again over and over and over. And I got to the point where I was confusing dream with reality. I was having sleep paralysis. I was starting to become a mess. And as luck would have it, I had some people in my life that were sober, that I could kind of see what their lives were like and what they were doing. And to their credit, no one ever said to me, you need to stop drinking, you need to get your life together. But I had people that I could ask questions to. And by the time, it was the summer of 2007, and I had started this love triangle where I was living with my boyfriend, started an affair with someone in New York, like blew up everything. I'm like, how many more times am I going to do this? And I hated myself. But alcohol was the only thing that was holding me together. I thought my problems are so much bigger than alcohol. Why would I stop doing the one thing that makes me feel better? So I said, I'm going to get a therapist, right? They'll sort me out. It'll be fine. And so I started with a therapist in DC. And after 2 sessions, I mean, she saw right through me. And I was kind of 50% honest with her about what was going on with me. And she was a non-alcoholic member of the professional community who said to me, you need to do something about your drinking. I don't know what it is. Let me tell you about this thing. It's called AA. I'm like, I know all about AA. I'm not going to stop drinking. And then by the next week I came in to see her, she said, you can keep coming here and wasting your time and your money. But if you keep drinking, you're going to keep getting sicker. And that's it. Whereas if you can put down the alcohol, you have a chance at a happy life. It gives me the chills to think of it. So I had my moment of clarity in a therapist's office. And at that moment, that was August 24th, 2007, I said, I'm an alcoholic. It was like the door kicked open, and yet the terror was there, So that day I got myself into my first AA meeting. AA is how I got sober. AA is how I remain sober. I didn't need to medically detox. So I think I stopped short of full physical addiction. I didn't feel great. I felt terrible. But I was able to get sober just by going to meetings. And I had surrendered so deeply that I was willing to take suggestion and do whatever it took to not live that way again. And so I got a sponsor. I went to 90 meetings in 90 days, more than that even. I made decisions to protect my sobriety and got through it and worked the 12 steps. And I can't mention recovery without mentioning that, because maybe I could have stayed dry, but the steps are really what set me free and got all of that stuff sorted out. And now I can stay on top of my fears, my resentments, my anxieties. And I have a sense that everything's truly going to be okay. So now in recovery, I met my husband when I was like 3 years sober. I have a daughter who's 7, who's never seen her mommy drunk. I mean, what a gift. And so now for me to stay sober, I have a home group. I go to regular meetings. I stay really close to AA. I try to help other women that are new to the program. I can't do this by myself. If I stop going to meetings, I will drink. And if I drink, I will eventually die. And it could be a long, drawn out death. And I don't want that. My life is too good now. So I think with that, I'll just mention the moment that I realized. I don't know if there was one. Like when Tom mentioned there's that invisible line that you cross somewhere along the way. And when I was new in sobriety, I was looking for that line. I wanted to know, at what point was I just a heavy drinker? And then at what point did I cross over into I'm an alcoholic? I don't know. I think it was built into me for that to happen. It could have been predestined. And I drank myself into it. But at some point, the pickle became a cucumber and I can no longer go back to becoming, the cucumber became the pickle. I can no longer go back to being a cucumber. So for me, the answer is abstinence. I know that there's no safe amount of alcohol that I can put into my body. And that if I can remain abstinent from alcohol and take my recovery seriously and help others, that I have a chance at maintaining a happy life. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. We really love hearing your story. I really appreciate that. And I do think that line is so challenging for people to see. I think the family members can see it maybe a little bit more clearly sometimes than the person who's in it, right? If you're observing this and you're seeing some behaviors change, and when people start begging you to go to meetings and that sort of thing, then you're not there yet. There's so much discord that we hear about regularly with all the families that we encounter. I know we really are kind of out of time, but I don't want to miss this question about naltrexone. So maybe Tom, if you want to jump on this, or anybody else who has any thoughts about the question is, my daughter doesn't think naltrexone has helped and she still has cravings. In all of your experience, does it usually work? Are there different doses? Do the alternative meds work better?
So there's with naltrexone, there's oral, which you can take, or you can get the Vivitrol shot. So if she's taking oral, she might want to try the shot, which might be a little bit different. But the answer is like Vivitrol is really, it's more effective with opiates the Vivitrol, alcohol like 50, 65% of the time. So there are people that report that they still get cravings even though they are on Vivitrol. So there are other like a compressate, and there's a couple other different drugs that you could try. I'm forgetting the other one.
Is Antabuse compensate? Is that what that is?
Antabuse more an antagonist, like it doesn't work the same way as naltrexone. So naltrexone started to get used off label for alcohol because the alcohol and opiate receptor sites are so similar. So sometimes it works for alcohol, sometimes it wasn't. So your daughter could be reporting the truth. So you could, number one, is she in therapy, or does she go to AA, or two key ones too, because those are other ways that you can work through cravings, and cravings do tend to go away over time. So the key is, telling your daughter just to hang in there, find other ways to work through that if the medication isn't working. Men more than women. Topamax is another one you could try. That seems to be really effective with females, not so much with males.
Interesting.
I knew it would come to me. So I hope that answers her question.
Max, interesting, huh?
Yeah. Antabuse will make you violently ill if you use any kind of alcohol on it. So it's a different class of medication. It's unfortunate, or you could just tell your daughter, keep taking it, like it'll work eventually. But I don't know how deceitful you want to be with your daughter. It won't hurt her to keep taking it, even if it's not helping with the cravings.
Right.
You can clarify too, because some people they call everything cravings. Sometimes it's your just more mental preoccupation and not actual physical cravings. And that's the other thing about Vivitrol. It works way better for the antsy physical type of cravings than the psychological mumbo jumbo that goes through our heads in early recovery.
It's thinking. Wow. Well, thank you all so much. I truly appreciate you sharing your stories and your expertise. This recording will be available sometime tomorrow. It takes a little while to process, but thank you all. And thanks everybody for being here with us. Thanks, Barbara, Tom, Claire. Appreciate it. Thanks, Bob.
Thank
See
you.
Gang. Barbara, nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you too.
Bob,
Take
thanks
care.
for asking me. Kim, I'll see you. I'll try to get the open house this week because I missed the last one.
Yeah, you got to
And
come.
Claire, always a pleasure, Claire.
Nice to see you as well.
Take care.
All right, thanks.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.